Kayla, it's so good to have you back on the podcast. I think you were first on a couple of years ago, actually, now at this stage, which is kind of crazy. So it's so good to have you back on the podcast. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to diving into our topic together today.
Yeah, I've actually been holding my breath and I have barely gotten any sleep just waiting for that invite to be back on your podcast. So it was a great sense of relief. And no, all kidding aside, I'm honored to be back, Robin, and excited to have a little riff session with you here.
Well, yeah, we're super excited to have you here. And, I will just address the elephant in the room because, my followers. And that is that Kayla's not a Swiftie and we forgive him for
Oh
that.
my gosh.
It's
I
a
literally
sore
just
point.
told you this. I literally just told you this, but I actually sang a Taylor Swift song because you were hosting an episode on my podcast called The Hot Seat, where you put me in the hot seat and, essentially, drill me with questions that make me sweat. And you said, "What is your favorite Swiftie song?" And I actually sang Love Story, like
You
literally
did.
sang.
Do you want to give
Um,
us a little
no, I
sample?
think I'm good. Once a day is good. Once a year is actually okay. Um, so yeah, I think I should be forgiven, and I think it's warranted. So, but yeah, I definitely wouldn't call myself a Swiftie, that's for sure. But you can't tell me all of your fans are Swifties, or all of your clients, fans, community are Swifties. There's no
I'm
way.
gonna say 70%. I have a feeling. I mean, I've never
All
done a
right, well
poll, but
then,
I
then,
have a feeling they're gonna back me up on this one anyway.
well, not 30% of them. I'm standing with the 30% as well too. You gotta help out the minorities as well too.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're there for them. But yeah, I'm excited for this episode today because we're going to be talking about money mindsets. And I specifically wanted you to come on to dive into this because, you know, a lot of people in business really struggle to get their business past certain points. They kind of get to this place where it's stagnant and they spend years and years and years in survival mode where things are stagnant and it's a struggle, and they kind of get used to it in terms of like, oh, that's just life and that's just business. And so I want to just start by asking you, like, why do you think people have such a poor relationship with money, and in what ways do people's mindset with money keep them perpetually broke?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, this is like my favorite topic. Let's go. Saddle up, everyone listening, because we're about to talk about some of the most important principles and concepts that will help you break free truly in your life, and level up. Like first, I just want to acknowledge how amazing money is, right? And even just that in general, that statement right there, and if everyone can just like really check in, if you were to repeat that out loud or even just hearing me say it, I want you to just like be there and just be with what's happening internally. And I bet you a lot of people are feeling a little bit uncomfortable with that statement. Now, you might not quite be there, some of you would be, but I think most of you, and this isn't to shame or judge you, like this is literally what I've been rewiring in my, so I'm right there with you. And this is what I've been managing for so long. And this is why I'm so glad you're here today. But I would say that a lot of the audience that's listening, if they would have to go to the dinner table with their family, or on a wine night, a girls night with their friends, or anywhere they're speaking up on stage or go on their social media, and they were to just be like, I love money is amazing, it's so incredible, I want more of it, it's a beautiful thing, I cherish it, there's an abundance of it. As soon as we were to say that, most people would have a really hard time saying that, right? It
Mm.
would make them feel a level of discomfort. Okay. That is just an exemplification of where we're at in society and how we've been conditioned to just look at money as this like taboo topic that, we feel essentially a sense of shame of wanting more of, right? So where does it start? It's important to know. I mean, it starts in childhood. And one of the reasons why I've done a deep dive into money mindset is because I've done a deep dive into the subconscious mind. And one of the things that I think can be the most valuable thing that we give your listeners today is just the simple fact that if they understand that their subconscious mind is in large part shaping their external reality. Your circumstances, what you get, and who you ultimately end up to be in this world is largely predicated on your subconscious programming. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What is your subconscious mind? Well, we have the subconscious and the conscious mind. Okay, the subconscious mind is below consciousness. And well, I should actually start with the conscious mind. The conscious mind is when we're awake, we're aware, we can actually be conscious of what's going on. Okay, and in real time, we can kind of make responses and decisions based off of what we're perceiving. Okay, it's something that not a lot of animals have. They do. They're actually not even fully sure, but they are pretty sure that some animals have some level of consciousness, but most animals actually don't. Okay. Now let's talk about the subconscious. The subconscious is below consciousness. So what it is it's this automatic computer like program, right? Is maybe the best way to describe it. It's our thoughts, ideas, emotions, actions, and they are autopilot. It's this conditioned program and pattern that we run off of that we don't even need to think about. We're not aware when we are in our subconscious. That's why it's called below consciousness. So consciousness can be looked at as an awareness. Now, the percentages will blow someone's mind if it's the first time they've ever heard of how much we live in our conscious as opposed to our subconscious programming. Throughout the day, we only live in our conscious mind about 5 to 10% of the time. The rest of the 90 to 95% of our thoughts, actions, ideas, and emotions are all subconscious. Okay. We are literally just like an automatic computer like program and pattern that we're running off of day in and day out. And maybe the best way to describe this is, or for people to realize the reality of this, is to maybe ask, like, have you ever just driven home from somewhere and like you don't even really remember driving home? You're just like,
Mm,
man, I got here without even having to think about it, and my mind was wandering, and you know again, repeating these same thought patterns and narratives that I always think about, the same stories you're telling yourself, and literally you just, your body, which is actually kind of the language of the subconscious, it just kind of made the right turns, and it ultimately ended up getting you to your destination without you even having to really think about it. Another good example is like, when you sit in your car, you get in your car, and we've just been so conditioned to put on our seatbelt, unless you're one of those rebels who doesn't put on their seatbelt. But I know for me, when I get in a car, I literally just like put on my seatbelt. I do not even have to consciously think about it. I just do it.
mm,
So some people are like, no, I'm not an autopilot program all day long, 90 to 95% of the time. Those are examples of how we really do that every day, unless we're put in a situation where we have to be really conscious, which quite frankly, we not often really are, right? Now, why is that of importance? Well, that is, again, 90 to 95% of your thoughts, ideas, actions, and emotions. So then the next question is like, okay, so how does that get formulated? If my subconscious essentially produces my thoughts, ideas, actions, and emotions 90 to 95% of the time, well, what really created that conditioned program? And what created that was our environment and our experiences growing up. Okay. So now let's talk about money. Now, the inside of that conditioned program is just a bunch of beliefs, Robin. Okay. And you could call them narratives, you could call them stories that we tell ourselves. And what are those stories in relation to? They're in relation to how the world works and who we are as a person. Okay. So we have how the world works. So, it could be, beliefs about, bears are scary and they can kill you. At some point, someone taught you that a bear is scary and they can kill you. If we didn't get taught that when we were younger, okay, we may go out into the forest. Maybe there's some, generational conditioning and evolving that has happened to the point where maybe we're just going to have that instinct. But probably we don't really have those with dogs. So we may go out into the forest. If no one really taught us that belief about how the world works when it comes to bears, we might go up and we might pet a bear. But at some point, someone taught us to be afraid of bears because they're a threat, and they could it could kill you. Okay. It could not end
Mm-hmm.
well. So that now becomes a belief that we have within the subconscious of how the world works. Now let's talk about beliefs about ourself. So our self concept or our self identity, also called the ego, is within the subconscious. Many people listening have probably heard of the ego, not ego as in like being egotistical, but like ego as in the self concept and self identity. Now, there are also a lot of beliefs that get attained and get wired into our subconscious in our upbringing through our environment and our experiences about who we are as a person. Okay. For example, if you see that your parents are, and this is actually a personal one to me. Let's relate one to money. If you see your parents working around the clock, going nonstop, and just barely making ends meet money wise, and then they're always talking about how money doesn't grow on trees, and money is a scarce resource, and you should always save your money, and Kaylor, we can't afford that, and it's just, money isn't endless, Kaylor. I repetitively heard that, and that's, by the way, what conditions something in our subconscious is repetition and emotion. But I repetitively heard that from my parents growing up. Okay, so there's a couple things going on there that you could adopt in terms of beliefs. Number one, something about how the world works. Money is a scarce resource, right? We should be very afraid of not having enough money. We should save as much as possible that we can. So those are beliefs about how the world works when it comes to money. But then also I adopted some beliefs about myself in those narratives when it comes to money as well too. I saw my parents work around the clock and barely just make ends meet. So through my observation, through my environment and my experiences, I adopted the belief that, like, well, I'm a product of them. So I didn't really feel too worthy of getting a whole lot of money when all I saw were the people. And this isn't to shame my parents. My parents are unbelievable and they actually do well at this point. But when I was a kid, they didn't have a whole lot of money. If all I saw in my environments and experiences were that I was a product of them, and all I saw was that they always were in a tight financial position and they worked around the clock and they were always stressed about money. Well, then think about how that, what conditioned beliefs I get within my subconscious about how money works in this world. And then also, what about me when it comes to money? Right. So those were I call them scarcity beliefs that I essentially adopted through my environment and experiences by observing the world around me, my caregivers, and they all had to do with scarcity. Okay. So then I developed, and you got to understand, our subconscious is wired for one thing and one thing only. Robin, if I were to ask you, what do you think your subconscious is wired for? What do you think it optimizes? Success or survival? What do you think?
Survival,
Yeah,
100%.
survival. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because for most of human history, up until like literally a little fraction of what the world we live in like is now, for the last 50 years, 100 years maybe, for all the way up until about 2.5 million years ago that we can track in recorded history, everything was about survival, right? That's why we have a subconscious. The subconscious is quick, it's autopilot, it helps you survive. So you got to understand, it doesn't care about success. It doesn't care about your G Wagon on your vision board. It doesn't care about, I want to make $12,000 a month every month. It doesn't want you to do that, because what you have to do to go do that is uncertain, and you got to step into unfamiliar territory to attain that. And it doesn't care about you getting that. What it wants you to do is, what better way to survive than to just continue doing what we've always done that's safe and that has led me to survival today. So it wants you to just repeat the pattern, right? And not step out and do things that are scary and dangerous, because your subconscious perceives it as a threat. So it only cares about survival. Okay. So here's the deal. Remember how I said I adopted those scarcity money type of beliefs, right? About how money works and how I work when it comes to money. If our subconscious only cares about survival and it really just wants to do what's familiar, because if I do what's familiar, then I can just repeat the pattern and then I can predict the future and then I have less threats and then I can ultimately survive. So if that's the case with our subconscious, then what your subconscious is wired to do is it's actually wired to just validate your internal beliefs. So, whatever you believe internally, it actually just wants to validate those in the external world. Why? Because, as I'm sure you've heard me say this, Robin, and many of you might have seen this, or being passed around the internet. This is a really good quote. It says that your psychology would rather choose a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven. Now, why would it
Mm.
choose an unfamiliar hell? Because it's only hell to us. Hell is not being successful, okay, in today's world, okay? But success for most of human history was just survival. Those two things were literally the same, okay? So, why your psychology and your subconscious will choose a familiar hell is because the way it thinks is it's like, well, it may not give me what I want, but at least I know what I'm going to get, right? That is what our subconscious is wired for. And Robin, what I'm about to get into is like money mindset and self sabotage 101. People wonder why, like, why would I self sabotage? I don't
Mm.
want that to happen. Why would I want the money. Why would I throw it away? Because that's what self sabotage is. You want the money, but you would throw it away. And the reason why you do throw it away is because you want the money consciously. So the part of you that wants the 12K a month consistently on your vision board, the G Wagon, the whatever, that's your conscious mind sitting there thinking, yeah, of course I want that. That would be amazing. It would be super pleasurable. But that instinctive, conditioned autopilot pattern and programming that you run off of 90 to 95% of the time only cares about you being safe. And guess what? You having to go out and do what is required to get that 12K a month or that G Wagon is uncertain. You can't predict the future. It's going to be dangerous. Not that you're objectively in real danger. It's dangerous in that you're going to have to step into unfamiliar territory, which your subconscious equates that to a threat. So, what it does is it wants to take all of your internal beliefs of, the world works like this, you are this when it comes to money, right? And again, all of those were around fear and scarcity when it came to money. Because, by the way, that's just what my parents got conditioned into them. Okay. What was wired into them was scarcity thoughts around money as well, too. Okay. So when it comes to the subconscious, all I really am doing, if I'm not really aware and conscious of it, is I'm now letting my automatic autopilot computer like program run, and it just wants to validate those internal beliefs. So let's look at those internal beliefs, right? It's like
Mm.
money is a scarce resource, and every single penny that I get, I should save, and I should be afraid to lose it. Okay. I have to work around the clock to get just enough of it. Okay. And if that's all I saw in my upbringing was my parents have just enough of it, then essentially I'm probably going to feel a little bit unworthy, or like it's maybe unfair, or that I'm going to feel greedy if I get too much of it, more than I actually need, more than my parents had. So, guess what my subconscious did for so many years from fear and scarcity is it just validated those internal beliefs. My external reality ended up matching my internal reality when it came to money. And that's just 101. That is truly just how we block ourselves from attaining money. The fear of not having it or the fear of losing money is actually perpetuating our ability to gain more of it than we need. Okay.
Mm.
And that's really what self-sabotage 101 is we're just so afraid of all those things that it actually puts us in a position where we take actions and make choices and have a behavior that blocks us from actually receiving it. I'm going to kind of pause there because that was a lot. I could definitely keep
Yeah.
going, and I'm sure we will, but like, is this all making sense so far?
Yeah, you know what? I really love the way you frame this, Kayla. And one thing you said at the very beginning that hit me because it's how I used to feel is when you said something about like you love money, like you think money is amazing. And I think that's going to hit a lot of our listeners as well because I've just seen a pattern with people typically who are drawn to starting a jewelry business. This isn't everyone, but there's a significant number of jewelry business owners that have been burnt out by the corporate world. They've seen people being greedy and doing things in business that they don't agree with. And they go into their jewelry business being like, I want an impact driven business. I want to help people. I want to connect people. I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to do all these things. And a significant number of designers will donate a portion to charity of their sales before they're even making money, before they've even broken even. And I did this when I was starting out many years ago as well. And now I see so many, and I've had multiple business owners say to me, if I can't donate to charity from day one, I'm not doing this business. And to me, that is potentially, not always in every situation, but it's potentially a case of like, I see money as evil. And if I'm not right from the get-go, like giving back and like sharing the wealth before I'm even wealthy, like I feel guilty accepting that money. Like, can you talk around that a little bit? Because I think we have a lot of listeners who really struggle with that, who would be very uncomfortable saying, I love money, who feel very uncomfortable even being super wealthy.
Yeah, like that's really what it is. Look, and it's easy for me to say now, because I had access to all this information. I learned this, but my parents didn't. But I'll tell you what I'll be teaching my kids about money is that money is beautiful. It is a very powerful tool. Okay. When you know how to use it properly, it is incredible. Um, and it is something that the more you make, the more impact that you're able to fulfill. Okay. Which then in turn ends up fulfilling you. Second thing I would be teaching them is if you do what's required in this world, some people will call that working hard. I'll say if you show up and do what's required, you can have as much of it as you want. Okay. And number three, essentially anyone who said that money doesn't buy happiness doesn't know how to invest it. Right.
Yeah.
That's really look, and some people challenge me on that. I'm not suggesting that money is the answer to holistic happiness. That's not what I would ever suggest. But I've been very poor. I've gotten my car repossessed. I've been in a buttload of debt. I have had no money coming in, and then I've been pretty financially free and done very well financially. I made quite a bit of money. I wouldn't say I'm, where I want to be yet, but I've been both. And I can tell you right now, if you know how to use money properly, man, money can absolutely increase the quality of your life. But money is also an amplifier. So just because we have some of these deep-seated feelings of unworthiness, sometimes that can make us go out and be overachievers in the world. And we can make money. So you can actually make money when you have all these deep internal scarcity mindset and beliefs and patterns. The problem you'll have if you have those is keeping the money. Okay. So you can make money because often we'll go out and we'll achieve so many things in the external world to overcompensate for our deep seated feelings of unworthiness. But then once we get it, we're so afraid of money and to lose it that we actually get rid of it because we push away. So like, this is actually an important point. The best example to use for how we can sabotage money once we've made it, and I'll get back more to your question as well too, Robin, but is in the dating scene. Okay. So if someone has a wound, let's say, because maybe they've been abandoned or rejected in the past when it comes to love. So all of a sudden they kind of have this in their subconscious, they have this wound, right? And some people call it like an abandonment wound, right? So ultimately, because of this experience in the past where you got really hurt, now all of a sudden your subconscious, because again, all it cares about is your survival. It didn't know that you just got broken up with and hurt and abandoned. It actually thinks you were in danger there because it was so highly emotional. So what it does is your subconscious goes to work and it basically says, I need to do everything I can to make sure I protect myself from ever being vulnerable to opening up that wound ever again. So what happens is consciously you have this conscious and subconscious battle now in the dating world, and I'll bring it back to money, is consciously you want to go out and find another partner and find love, because consciously it's on your vision board or whatever, you're like, I do want to find love and get happy and have a family. But your subconscious is only thinking about that abandonment wound. Okay. So then you go out there and you finally start dating, you finally find someone who's like really good. And then all of a sudden you get really scared because, well, you have this abandonment wound. Your subconscious, when you start to slip into that, really just wants to make sure you're never open and vulnerable to experiencing that wound ever again. So subconsciously, you'll actually push away what you consciously truly want, right? You'll push it away. You'll create a fight, right? You'll look for things in them that like they're perfect for you, but you'll look in things for them and you'll be overly perfectionistic and you'll say, well, I can't do that because of this, that, and the other thing, and you'll push it all away, right? Or a very common thing for, unfortunately, for women is they'll go for the narcissistic asshole, right? And they'll go for that person instead of going for the perfect person for them. The reason why they do that is because when they do prove their internal belief right, which is I get abandoned kind of thing, then first off, they could validate and confirm that deep internal belief. But then also, when that person does abandon them, they can just say, well, he was a dick anyways. He was an asshole anyways. He was a narcissist anyways, right? So they go for the person who's going to be essentially less of a risk to be abandoned by rather than the perfect person. We do the same thing for money, right? So we're actually consciously battling our subconscious, because consciously we want to go out and make money. So consciously we will pick ourselves up every day and do the things that are required to make money. And then as soon as we get it, we're so afraid to lose it, because that's what is really the most, biggest threat to our survival is losing the money and not having anything of it. So even though it doesn't make sense consciously, our subconscious throws it away and spends it because we're so afraid of actually losing it. And that if we go down to not having it again, then we're not open and vulnerable to losing money, right? So we're not open to the fear of failure anymore, right? Because if you don't start, if you don't have what you attained or want to attain, you can ultimately lose it, right? So again, consciously and logically, this doesn't make sense, but this is what our subconscious does when it comes to, making sure that we can, stay on track for survival and avoid all threats together. Now, you asked about, I want to make sure I come full circle to your question. What did you ask about
Oh,
again, Robin?
yes. So, well, one thing that came up when you were saying that, I just wanted to say is I've seen a lot of business owners finally start hitting goals and making multiple six figures or six figures, get to the end of the year when it's tax season and realize they've gone into debt because they actually spent way more on just like fun things, designer clothes, whatever it is. Because as soon as they start generating that money, they start like throwing it away at such a fast pace, and it is so interesting to see that play out. But I think my question, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I just wanted to
No.
say, yeah, like, so there's two things going on there, just to confirm. There is the fear of failure. There's the fear of losing the money. And I know it doesn't make sense. It's like, but that's when you know a wound is at play. When your strategy to avoid the wound is actually creating the wound itself. Okay. So let's go back to the dating example. Your fear of abandonment is causing you to push away when you actually start to get the love you want. Your fear of the abandonment is causing you to push away the love that you actually want, therefore literally perpetuating the abandonment. Okay. Same thing with money. Your fear of losing money and not having any money as soon as you start to attain money is actually causing you to push away the money, okay, and avoid it, because if you don't try and you don't attain, then there's no risk of failure. So you're actually, by pushing it away, perpetuating the fear of not having enough money. Okay. So it's like this vicious cycle. Now, the other thing that's going on there as well, too, is remember how I said the subconscious is there to validate your internal beliefs as well, too. So we have the ego and the self concept. Remember how I said my parents, from what I observed, they worked around the clock, they were super stressed, and they didn't make a whole lot of money. They never seemed to have enough. So I'm a product of my parents. So all I did was observe that and say, well, that must be where I'm supposed to be, right? I didn't feel
Hmm.
super worthy of being a multi-millionaire when I watched who I'm a product of, not have a whole lot of money growing up. So again, our subconscious validates our internal beliefs in the external world. So when it comes to like charging what you should, that's really hard, right? It's really hard to stretch and charge something that, you probably should be charging in your business, or asking people for the money that you think that, you know, ultimately objectively is the right amount that you should be charging. We have a fear of stretching to that point because ultimately we're just wanting to confirm that, like, no, I'm the kind of person that should make $4,000 a month because that's all I know. That's all I observed growing up. That's what my caregivers made. That's what the people around me made. And this is one of the reasons why it's important to hang out with people who are making a good amount of money or more money than you, not because, you're that selfish. They got to be good people too. But it's good to at least surround yourself with some people who can stretch that idea and that self concept within you of like, I'm not supposed to make a whole lot of money.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that because I listened to a podcast the other day and I don't remember which one it was, but they were saying how your environment, like the area and stuff that you grow up in, has a huge impact on how successful you'll be growing up. Even if you don't grow up in like in the family environment that's ideal, but like what you're surrounded by, and like you saying, like be around successful people who are doing well, it does have a huge impact. And I really like that because it's kind of like a tangible thing for people who are listening to go and do and start being conscious of, and like getting into circles or communities of people who are doing what it is they're wanting to do, who are successful. But can you, like, for somebody who's listening who's like, oh my gosh, this is me, I can now sort of recognize that I have been going through life unconsciously for all these years. I'm here trying to build my jewelry business. I'm doing all the things I feel like I need to be doing, but I'm on the hamster wheel. And now I'm recognizing, like, maybe this is kind of what subconsciously I've been dealing with. Like, what are some steps they can take to start shifting out of that? Like, how do we actually shift out of that cycle?
Yeah. So the easiest way to look at it is you got to look at what has been my environment. Okay. And whatever your environment has been, that is guaranteed what is wired into your psychology, is wired into your subconscious. Therefore, your subconscious, if you're not careful enough, and we're going to talk about what that means, if you don't interrupt this pattern, then your subconscious is no question going to go out and create those circumstances in your external world. Okay. No question. Your external circumstances in reality are just going to be a projection and a reflection of your internal wiring. And your wiring comes from what environment you grew up in and what environment you're around. So, Robin, let's be honest. I mean, most people in society, bearing some, like, very minimal exceptions, hang around, regular, everyday, average people, right? And this, as I talk about this, there's always a risk of sounding, again, a little pretentious here, and that, you know, we're above those people. Well, I don't really believe or look at it that way. What I actually think is those people could have so much more if they just woke up to this stuff as well too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we're better than those people. It's just that we're going to wake up and realize we can have so much more. And guess what? Then maybe one day we'll teach them that they could have so much more as well too. But who did I hang around? I mean, look, my parents just got by. We weren't like super poor, but I remember one time I went up to my mom and asked me if I could buy a basketball because I wanted to get into basketball. And she told me she'd have to save her tips for a few weeks. She's a hairdresser. So, like, yeah, that's like we weren't wiping our butts with dollar bills, put it that way. Right. So, what environment were you around? Like, Robin, like my parents made, I don't know what they were making, but like, yeah, they made like probably just below or maybe just what the average income is. Most people are hanging out with, people who have, just your regular everyday jobs, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
teachers, um, office workers, people in the corporate world, and look, those people make, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 a year, maybe 80. Maybe they get close to six figures if they're lucky in those kind of jobs. If they get to six figures, that's like considered, quite well, and is certainly above the average in our society. So it's like, okay, well, if that's really who you're around, then you have to understand then that is what is wired within your subconscious. And that is what, if you are not interrupting that pattern and you're not doing what I'm about to talk about, that's essentially what you're going to go out and manifest. We talk about manifestation a lot. A lot of people think that manifestation is, just about your thoughts and your feelings. That's the beginning of it, but that's not really the meat and potatoes of manifestation. You don't actually really manifest what you think or what you feel. You actually manifest who you are. Who you are, meaning what's your behavior? How are you showing up in this world? Okay. And most people are making, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 a year, or maybe even less in their business. Cause, in the beginning, most people really struggle with business and don't even make, 30 or $40,000 a year. Most people are going to continually and perpetually make that kind of money because their wiring based on their environments and experiences is causing them to show up in this world as someone who makes that kind of money. They are not showing up and doing what's required and taking the actions and making the decisions that a multimillionaire would. I think most people on this planet, bearing unfortunate circumstances or disabilities or anything like that, can be multimillionaires. I really do. I think some people will get there quicker. I think some people can make bigger fortunes,
Mm-hmm.
but I really think everyone can. So your question was, well, okay, Kaylor, I get it. My internal wiring is based on my environment and experiences, and then that ultimately shapes the reality around me and my circumstances and the amount of money that I make. So what do I do about it? And that is the real question. Here's the thing. As humans, Robin, we have this superpower that no other living species on planet Earth has. And that is, we have the ability to feel fear and act anyways. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Let's expand on that even further. If you take a deer in the wild and a deer is riddled with fear and scarcity, it will not be able to consciously wake up in that moment and respond in a different way. It will just be hijacked by that fear. It'll be completely subconscious, unconscious, in that automatic survival like program, and it will just do whatever that survival instinct tells them to do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's every other living thing on planet Earth. But what humans can do is, you could be in a moment, Robin, where you are faced with some sort of opportunity where you have to make a decision, and you could be riddled with fear because you might have had the same upbringing that I did. You might have the same feelings of unworthiness for money that I did. You might have the same beliefs about how money works that I do, that it's, there's never enough money, and, money doesn't grow on trees, and like there's a scarce amount of it. You should save all your money. You can feel all those feelings and be riddled with fear. And you could actually, as Viktor Frankl says, he says, your freedom lies between stimulus and response. Because he says between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies our ability to respond. And in that response lies our growth and our freedom. So what does that mean? That means that in that moment, you could literally, with the stimulus, which is what happens, and then you start to feel the fear coming up inside your body, you can actually be the observer of that fear. Okay. And you know how he said it, there's a space between fear and response, or between stimulus and response.
Mm-hmm.
That space is created by being the observer. That's called being conscious. That's called waking up out of that program that deer can't wake up out of because it just doesn't have the ability to. This is our superpower, to wake up in that moment and say, oh, that makes me anxious. And that makes me anxious because when I grew up, all my parents talked about was how money doesn't grow on trees and it's a scarce resource. We should hold on to it. We should never spend too much of it. And I also have in my self concept this belief and this narrative that I always tell myself that I'm not very much worthy of a lot of money because my parents only made $4,000 a month, when I was growing up, and I'm a product of them. So that internal programming is trying to get me to stick with the familiar hell. The familiar
Yes.
hell is the pattern I've been living in for my entire life. I've been broke. I've been in debt. I've always struggled to pay my bills. I've never gotten the amount of money that I desire. And right now, my subconscious is telling me that I should stick with the familiar hell pattern. And you know what you can do? You know what your superpower as a human is where your freedom lies, is you can observe that and you can wake up in that moment and be conscious, and you can actually choose to respond. Remember, he says between stimulus and response there's a space. You create that space by being the observer, and in that space lies your ability to respond. So then you respond by, instead of unconsciously reacting to your fear and doing what perpetually keeps you broke, you could actually in that moment consciously respond by saying, I'm actually going to do this anyways. And you want to know what it's called when you feel the fear and you do it anyways? It's my favorite C word. It's called
Mm.
courage, right? So in that moment, you build up enough courage to say, yeah, that's just my anti me inside of me. Everyone's got an anti you. It's that survival instinct that's trying to dim your light and keep you into that familiar hell. And you say, I'm going to step into and consciously respond to make the decision that's going to help me step into the unfamiliar heaven for the first time. And the only reason why it feels uncomfortable is because it's unfamiliar. And that just goes against my wiring. And you want
Mm.
to know the beautiful part about this, Robin, is that when you, with enough repetition, are able to consciously make that decision to step into the unfamiliar, there's something called exposure therapy. This is how we get over fears. With enough repetition, you expose yourself little by little with tolerable steps to that fear or that wound that you have or the thing that you're afraid of, the scarcity. You step into that with enough courage and you do it with enough repetition, then you start to get desensitized to it. And then
Mm.
the wiring and your conditioning starts to change, because you start to see with enough repetition, like, oh, when I do that, I actually feel really good. And it ended up turning out well. And I need to do more of this. And then you start doing more and more and more. And then the same way in which we developed that internal wiring and conditioning is the same way in which we reprogram and recondition it through emotion and repetition. That's really what we do about it. We have to make more conscious responses and decisions and choices, Robin. We have to step into the unfamiliar heaven as opposed to continuing to live in the unfamiliar hell. And you'll see it in the dating side of things as well too. Let me just give that example because for some reason people can comprehend that a little easier, I think. um, if that same person with the abandonment wound starts to get that perfect person and starts to connect with them and they start to fall in love with that person, they can also wake up in that moment when they're out for dinner with them, and they can wake up in that moment and say, ooh, things are going really well, and I'm starting to feel really or discomfort or uncomfortable from that, because my survival instinct and the way I'm wired is trying to tell me that that's unsafe, and it wants me to go back to the familiar hell, which is to just throw this guy away and to perpetually go into a state of being isolated and alone, because I'm actually just afraid of being abandoned. And what you can do in that moment when you create that space is you can choose and respond in a way that says, no, I'm actually going to step into the unfamiliar, even though it feels uncomfortable. I'm going to step into that, and I'm actually going to go for the unfamiliar heaven, because my unfamiliar heaven is actually getting the guy that I truly want and that I've always dreamed of. And I'm not going to be a victim of letting my unfamiliar, or sorry, conditioned survival wiring tell me that I should be perpetually alone and isolated just because I'm afraid of being hurt. In order to truly love, you got to be hurt. And in order to be truly rich and wealthy, guess what? You got to take some risk, which means you got to spend some money. And I'm sure that's probably what we're going to talk about next, is investing
Yeah.
versus spending and whatnot. So,
Yeah, I love how you use that example. For some reason, the relationship example is just so much easier to comprehend, and and kind of relate to. So I do want to talk about investing because I think in business, especially with a lot of jewelry business owners, I've seen a lot of people like they get really flustered by this. They get really anxious. There's a lot of fear that comes up. So can you talk to us a little bit about, investing and the difference between being broke versus poor and how that kind of is going to impact their business building journey?
Yeah. So if you talk to anyone who's created true wealth, like, by the way, this is who we should be learning from when it comes to, like, it's still to this day, I will always learn from people who just have more money than me. Okay. Like, if someone is trying to give you money advice or you are learning from someone, just basically say, like, show me your bank account. Like, maybe not literally, right? Because maybe that's a bit invasive, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
prove to me that you're worthy enough to give me money advice. I mean, look, I'm not going to give money advice to, someone who is, 10 times has 10 times the net worth that I have, right? I'm going to learn from that person. So just be really careful who you learn from. And here's the deal. If you talk to anyone who's truly wealthy and you ask them, "Hey, did you get there by saving money?" They'll just laugh at you, right? Um, because here's the deal: is most people are learning how to make money and become wealthy from people who actually aren't wealthy themselves. Did you know most financial advisors are broke? Right?
Mm.
They're
It's
not
wild.
wealthy, right? So why are we like learning from someone who has a job at a bank? And again, I'm not trying to shame or judge people who have a job at a bank. I'm sure it's a great job. It's just like, that's not who I'm going to learn from. I'm going to learn from people who have been uberly successful with making money, or at least someone who is much wealthier than I am, right? That's who I'm going to learn from. And here's the deal. If you ask them, did you get there by saving money? They're going to laugh at you and they're going to say, no, I got here by investing money. And when some people say, well, you got to save to invest. Yeah. Okay. Like, I'm just talking saving money as in holding on to money and letting it sit there, right? We live in a society. How crazy is it, Robin, that we live in a society where everyone's trying to save as much money as possible? I
Yeah.
literally remember as a kid, like my aunts or like my mom's clients, when I would be around, they'd be like, when I was kind of getting to a money where when I was getting to an age where I was starting to make some money, I remember people just perpetually telling me, like, are you saving your money? Make sure you save money, save money, save money. And it's like, okay, maybe let's not, and look, I'm being really blunt here. Maybe let's not do what most people in society are saying, because most people in society are broke, right? So guess
Mm.
what? If you want to not be broke, you're going to have to do things differently. You're going to have to step into that unfamiliar heaven, because everyone in society is stuck in the unfamiliar hell. What they'll say to you is, they say, no, I didn't get there by saving money. I got there by investing money. So let's talk about investing money. Well, if you want to make money, what you need to do is you need to solve problems. That's how we make money. Is we develop skills that solve problems. And then, as Elon Musk says, he says we get paid in direct proportion to the difficulties of the problems we solve. So if you solve a big and difficult problem because you have the skills to do so, that increases your value in the marketplace, and then you get rewarded by money. Like, it's as simple as that. As long as you work and actually do work, um,
Hmm.
it's as simple as that. So, how do we develop skills and how do we increase our value in the marketplace? Guess what? We have to invest in ourselves. Okay. Now, everyone is going to try and tell you that you should save money. And that's, yeah, something you have to understand, that is in your wiring and conditioning, is you're going to be in a place. And I'm not saying throw your money around and invest it in everything. Don't be stupid with it. But you're going to be in opportunities where you could invest your money into something that's going to bring you a greater return in the future, and you're going to be riddled with fear because your internal conditioning and everything you've ever been taught has said, no, you got to hold on to that money. And it's holding on to that money in which actually perpetually keeps you broke, right? It really does, because holding on to money and not having it work for you does nothing. Not having it work for you to be able to develop skills that solve problems in the marketplace doesn't increase your value, and then you don't make money. So we have to invest. Okay, now you mentioned
Mm.
broke versus poor. What do I mean by that? Well,
Yeah. And actually, Kayla, I just want to touch on one thing you just said because you're talking about people solving problems. And this is actually a block I've seen a lot of jewelry business owners struggle with. They often, because they're coming from the corporate world where they were maybe solving bigger problems, and then they're coming and creating gorgeous jewelry and they're selling it. And sometimes they're like, how is this really impacting like the world and my customers? Is this actually making a difference? And I just want to remind like all our listeners, like, your jewelry is a form of art. Like, it has a huge impact depending on the niche you're in, the type of jewelry you're selling. I have clients who are making high-end pieces or engagement rings. I mean, there's so much meaning and such a problem that you're solving there, but it doesn't seem like a problem. But just keep that in mind when we're talking about problems. It doesn't necessarily look like an obvious problem in the jewelry industry, but you're adding so much value and beauty and joy and connection to people's lives, and you're helping them celebrate themselves, celebrate their stories, celebrate milestones with other people, even just bringing little bits of joy to their day. So I just wanted to clarify that for anyone who's listening and panicking.
well, look, I'll say this, that when you have to understand what a problem is in the marketplace. That's what I mean. I'm just really going to put my business hat on here. Like, so a problem I have with jewelry is it's not accessible to me enough. Um, because when I go to the mall, for example, when I shop in person, I don't really seem to ever really come across too much jewelry that I actually like. And if I do, I'll buy it. But I also don't want to have to like go to the mall to find, especially nowadays, to find like a ring or whatever. So my problem that I legitimately have, that I will pay money for, that a jewelry business owner will be solving, is if they somehow were to find me, and this has happened because I get hit up with ads for this, if they catch me at the right time and show me like, hey, look at all these rings, because I like rings and I like
Mm,
bracelets. Okay, I like watches. I love chains. I'm wearing a chain. And the problem that I have that a jewelry business can solve is like, hey, here's one website and you'll never have to look at another website again. And you can always just check it. And it's a really easy checkout process. It's high quality jewelry that's not going to, wear down or, rub off on you or anything like that. It's going to stand the test of time. It looks really cool. That's maybe the most important thing. It looks, it fits my style, and it's an easy checkout process, and you can just check that website every month for the new releases, and you can have, as much jewelry, and it gets delivered right to your door. Like, that would be solving a legitimate problem for me, right? Like, yeah, is that the most impactful thing in my life? Like, no. But the problem that you're solving is, honestly, it's, if we really look at the psychological aspect of it, it's status, like, and Alex Hormozy actually talks about this. He thinks the biggest, most profound thing you can do for people is increase their status. Like, I'm not gonna lie, why do I wear jewelry? Because I want to look good. I want to feel good because I look good. And then, yeah, I do care. I want people to look at it and be like, oh, I love that. That looks really good. And it's sleek. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's why you wear jewelry. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that, although it's hard to admit, I think on a subconscious level, it really is about status. And I think that can get taken out of hand and become toxic. Of course, I don't think it is toxic. It feels healthy to me, but I think we're all desiring some status, right?
mm,
We all want to be able to go out into this world and look good and feel good and have people say, like, yeah, that's a very, like, I want people to be like, that's a very well dressed man. I love when I hear that. It also just makes me feel confident. So then when I have nice jewelry, I show up better. And they've even done research on this where, like, you'll show up better if you actually, dress for success. And you'll even have more success because you dress for success, because of the confidence that it gives you. So, yeah, that's absolutely the problem that you're solving. Broke versus poor. So, when it comes to investing, here's what the wealthy people are saying. They're not saying hold on to your money and hoard it. Okay, that's what broke people do. What they're saying is get rid of it. Literally, that's what my financial mentors tell me. They're like, get rid of your money.
Mm.
Isn't that crazy, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean go, buy stuff that loses its value as soon as you purchase it. It doesn't mean to spend it on a bunch of personal expenses. It means go out and do three things. Number one, invest in you. More than anything, invest in you. Invest in skills, invest in knowledge, invest in expertise, invest in transformation, invest in community, invest in you. Things that will increase your value in the marketplace and make your life better and just make you have a higher quality of life. That's number one. Number two, invest in your business. Okay, so that's the second thing you invest in. Get rid of your money by putting it back in your business, because that's the best investment that you absolutely can make, because it's the one you have the most control over and it's the one that has the highest potential for return, so long as you do it right. And then number three, invest in assets, income generating assets. Okay, that's where you want to put your money towards. Thirdly, after you invest in yourself, after you invest in your business, then you want to invest it in assets. This is real estate. This is gold and silver. This could be crypto. This could be private equity. It's just something, the stock market, something you invest in that is going to be generating a return for you, so that your money isn't just sitting in your bank account, but it's actually generating more income as you go. And here's the thing, that's the difference between being broke and poor. Poor is a mindset. Okay. Being poor is your mindset causes you to actually have no money at all. Being broke is just getting rid of your money, right? And then being paper broke, right? Like being cash broke. Okay. You want to be cash broke. Okay.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and you want to get rid of your money, so that when you don't have a whole lot of it available, it also gives you more motivation to be able to go out and generate more money. When our money is sitting around, honestly, that's often just a huge risk factor to going out and spending it. When it's already been put away into investments that are making more money for you in the future, uh, the biggest benefit of that might be that it might prevent you from actually going and spending it on stupid shit you don't need
Mm.
to
That
impress
is
people you
such
don't like, by the way.
yeah, that is such good advice. Oh my gosh. This has been such a powerful conversation. I feel like we could dive into so much more, but I know we're at time. But thank you so much for coming and sharing this, Kayla. I know this is going to have added like open so many people's minds to just like their money mindset. And like this is one of those kind of game changing shifts like we always talk about that people can make, that is going to have a huge impact. If you can work on your money mindset, it's going to be one of those things that has a huge impact on the trajectory of your life, of your business. Like it can change everything for you. So I'm so glad that we're talking about this. And yeah, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So I just want to like really reiterate that, like, just do not be afraid of money. And I know, understand that your subconscious is afraid. Your internal wiring, that survival program that you run off of most of the time, is afraid of money. But consciously start to just remind yourself every day, like, money's beautiful. And it's so funny. Like, I hear this all the time. People are just so like, yeah, money isn't everything, and money is not that important. And like, people think it's the end all be. It's really important. It's really important.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with, there's a healthy and a toxic amount of everything. So of course it can get to if all you're doing is riddled with fear of, not having enough, and you're already making multiple six figures, you're already, and it's all you focus on, to a point where it infringes on your inner peace and your ability to just do what's required. Yeah, of course, that's a toxic amount of a desire of money, but there's a healthy amount of it as well too. And I think a lot of people really don't have that. A lot of people, it's easy to just write it off and say money's not that important. It's very important, and you should love it, and you should understand that it is sacred. It's not something that you should, you know, well, I don't know if I'll say it's sacred, but what I would say is it's not to be taken lightly. That's what I meant by sacred, right? It's not to be taken lightly. Um, and if you go out and work and do what's required, you can get more of it. And that's a beautiful thing. And again, anyone who said money doesn't buy happiness just didn't know how to give it away and how to spend it
Mm.
properly, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, so yeah, this has been so good, and I do want to share with you guys while we have Kayla on the call here, or on the podcast here, that we have been working on something behind the scenes that I have been wanting to do since I started the Jewelry Business Academy, and so I'm really, really excited because we're going to be hosting our very first in-person retreat. It's called the Jewelry Biz Retreat. It's going to be in September in Kelowna, BC. It's like one of the most beautiful parts of Canada. So I literally cannot wait for it. I'm super excited. We have clients flying in from Australia, the UK, the US, Canada. Like it's going to be incredible. And I'm going to be coaching, doing workshops. Kaylor is also going to be joining me. So Kaylor's going to be there doing some coaching and in-person workshops as well with all our attendees. We're going to be going hiking, doing cold plunges, breath work, going to wineries, going for dinners. Like it's going to be amazing. I literally can't wait. And I'm just telling you guys that because we are going to open a very limited number of seats for people who aren't clients to come and join us, or tickets, not seats, for this retreat. So we'll be sharing details. I will drop the link for you in the show notes, and we'll also be sharing more about this on our email list. So if you're there, you'll hear all about it and you'll be able to see the itinerary. And if you're kind of excited about that, go take a look. We would love to see you there, but we only have a very limited number of spots available. So I wanted to give you guys a heads up. But yeah, really looking forward to that. And thanks so much for joining me today, Kayla. This has been super fun. And if you guys did enjoy this episode, let us know, because if it's popular, we'll look at bringing Kayla back on for a monthly mindset series of podcasts. I'm signing you up live here.
Let's go. I love it. Yeah, thanks for having me, Robin. This was lots of fun.